Squad Car 37 Live will begin momentarily. In the meantime, please enjoy this musical interlude from tonight's guest.
When death was arrested and my life began, oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. Released from my chains, I'm a prisoner no more. My shame was ransom, he faithfully bore. And he came to my death, and he called me his friend. Oh, when death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. Oh, I know that there'll be better days. Oh, that sunshine about to come my way. May we never ever shed another tear for today. 'Cause oh, I know that there'll be better days, better days.
Squad Car 37 Live will begin momentarily. Changing gears a bit from our previous musical selection, here are a series of slightly strange audio explorations. Please enjoy. If you thought that was bananas, check out this musical collaboration with Siri.
Hello, good people. My name is Siri, and today I'm going to jam with my friend Jason. I'll be playing the marimba. Let's get started. That was fun.
Squad Car 37 Live will begin momentarily. In the meantime, please enjoy another musical interlude from tonight's guest. Squad Car 37 Live will begin now. good people. I'm JP, and you are watching Squad Car 37 Live. My guest tonight is a true guitar hero who's recorded with numerous artists during his time as a professional session musician. He's toured with Steven Curtis Chapman, led musical worship services for multiple mega churches, studied under best-in-class virtuoso guitarists, including Paul Gilbert and Frank Gambale. He's a graduate of the renowned Musicians Institute in Los Angeles, California, and I was lucky enough to have him as my guitar teacher and mentor for over 2 decades ago, and I'm so excited to welcome Randy Pearce.
Hey, Jace, how are you, man?
Hey, I'm great, thanks. Thanks for joining.
Absolutely, man. I'm honored that you would have me on your killer show, dude. So good.
It is my pleasure. Before we dive into your literally inspired music story, let's talk guitars. So
Okay.
What was your first electric guitar, and what do you play now?
Oh, man. So my very first guitar was a Les Paul knockoff called a Cortez Pro. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of this guitar before, but it was just a piece of junk. But it was so cool, and it was all black, which was, I was way into like Joe Perry, Jimmy Page, those guys, and they were Les Paul guys. So that was my very first guitar. But I quickly upgraded to a Fender Strat, I think it was a 78 Strat, because that's when Van Halen hit, and he had a Strat, so I needed a Strat too. So, and then I've been pretty much a Fender guy ever since. But right around 91 or 92, I got connected with a guitar builder, guy named Tom Anderson. And he's kind of like a John Sewer or like a Paul Reed Smith, these guys who just make boutique instruments. And he's out here in California. He's like in the next town over for me right now, oddly enough. And my son works at his shop winding his pickups, which is super cool. So I've been with Tom as my main guitar since 1992 to current day. So.
Wow. So Tom Anderson guitars are fantastic, and I think you might actually have one lying around near you. Can you hold it up and show us what that beautiful axe looks like?
So this is Tom's, it's called a Raven, and it's kind of his Jazzmaster variation of a Jazzmaster. So he does any kind of pickup combinations, any kind of neck shape, anything you could possibly want, stop tail piece, tremolo, whatever. I mean, it's custom made down to the screws. So you can have him literally build you your dream guitar based on, this is a Jazzmaster. He's got Strats, Tellys, Les Paul style called the Bulldog. So yeah, I've got one of his Strats, and this has kind of become my favorite. Wow. This kind of offset Jazzmaster style, which I never really played ever until he came out with this Raven, and man, I mean, I just fell in love with it. So it's a shorty scale. It's a 24 and a whatever that is, 24 and a quarter or 3/4 or whatever the Les Paul scale length is. Mm-hmm. That's what this is. So a couple of humbuckers and that's it.
So what do you like most about it? Is it a combination of the feel and the sound and all the goodies?
All the goodies. The greatest, I mean, Tom's stuff is all great, but the thing I love the most is the neck. And I mean, any guitar players out there know that your hand has to be able to fit comfortably within a neck radius for the size of your hand, the size of your fingers, all that stuff. So it doesn't feel like you're working against the instrument. And Tom's necks are the best I've ever played.
Oh, wow.
I don't know what voodoo he does, but it's crazy. Stainless steel frets, so the frets never wear out. You never get those divots. And from there, I mean, it's all just butter from there. But his necks are, if you haven't played an Anderson guitar players, I highly recommend it. But be warned, because you'll probably want to buy one, and they're not cheap. So.
But it sounds like well worth it. Now, you had when I knew you, We met, you were giving lessons at a place called Naperville Music, and that's where I went, and we got connected there. And the guitar you had was the Strat, I think, that you're talking about, sort of a wood finish,
Yeah.
beautiful, dual humbucker.
Mhm.
You had equipped it, you had customized it a bit, so it had a Floyd Rose whammy bar on it, floating head tremolo system.
Yeah.
And then you got another guitar after that, which was, if I recall right, it was a white Sabre, Ibanez Sabre, right?
Yeah. So, man, you have a good memory. Yeah. So a white Sabre, that was quite an upgrade, because I had kind of annihilated my Fender trying to make it like Van Halen's guitars, and
Yeah, like the Frankenstein. Yeah.
yeah, it was total Frankenstein, but
Sure.
it was like mostly dead Frankenstein. So I upgraded to an Ibanez Sabre, which were those super thin bodied guitars, and I only did that because that's what Frank Gambale played. He played
Yes.
the Sabre, the thin one,
Sure.
and I discovered that after he got connected with Chick Corea, the Chick Corea Electric Band,
Mhm.
and that's where he kind of busted out that Ibanez style. So when we were MI together, he played a Strat too. It was like hot pink. It was some crazy, like, bizarro hot pink Fender, and then he got hooked up with Ibanez, and then he was one of the first, actually, like before Satriani or Vai or Petrucci or any of those guys. Gambale was one of the first, and so yeah. So then I was turned on to Ibanez for a few years, but really just a few. I mean, just a couple, because that's when I discovered Tom Anderson, and then it was kind of game over for anything else.
Yeah, I remember in the later years of me taking lessons with you, you talking and raving about Tom Anderson guitars even back then, and saying that that is like the premium studio musician guitar. It's the one to be sought after.
Yeah, yeah.
So the talk about necks a little bit. The Fender Stratocaster, which I love,
Mhm.
you kind of have to fight with it a little bit, because
Mhm.
it's got a slightly thicker neck, and the Sabre was like playing on paper, right? So those
Yeah,
Ibanez are just like paper thin, like
yeah.
thinner than the minnow's eyelash.
Yeah, exactly. And the great thing about Ibanez was their fretboard radius was totally flat. So you could
Hmm.
lower the action down to nothing,
Yeah.
and also bend without
Yes.
it fretting out.
Yep.
So that was awesome. But then the back of the neck was like, it was like a 2x4. It was like there was nothing there.
Yeah.
Whereas the Fenders, like, you could really dig into it, but they've got the 7 1/4 and the 9 1/4 radius, so you couldn't really get down low and bend without fretting out. And so it's like you couldn't find this perfect marriage
Yeah.
of beefy neck with flat radius. And that's what Tom does so well.
Awesome.
So he's got whatever neck shape you need, and then his radius, it's a compound. So it goes from 12 to 14 as you gradually go up the neck.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So kind of anywhere you are, it feels perfect. I mean, it's just kind of a work of art. So yeah, so Tom and guys like Sewer and those guys, they took the best of every guitar built. I mean, in my opinion, it's kind of like boutique amps that you see, like Matchless and Two Rock and these things. It's kind of like they took the best of a Fender or the best of a Vox or whatever that is, and made their own thing. And that's really what Tom does. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned Frank Gambale.
Mhm.
For those who are not familiar with this technique, what is sweep picking, and where did you learn it?
So sweep picking is it's a way of sometimes it's called economy picking. I don't know if you've heard that term,
Yep.
but all it is making as little motion going from string to string.
Mhm.
So instead of alternating everything, and you guitar players will know, once you're on a pick, upstroke, and you have to go to the next one, you have to skip over the string you were just on to go to the next string. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
Whereas sweep picking is a style where it's all just one motion.
Yeah.
And what's kind of interesting is when I went to MI, I didn't know any theory. I didn't know anything I was doing. But I just kind of had this raw ability,
Mhm.
and I was sweep picking before I knew what I was doing. It
Wow.
just made sense to my hands, and so that's what I did.
Yeah.
And then when Gambale came along as one of my teachers, and that's what he was doing times a million,
Yes.
it was just one of those kind of magic moments where I was already kind of doing that, like my muscle memory was already there,
Hmm.
so that when I took it to the next level, it made sense to me because I had already kind of gone, down the field a little bit with that sweep style.
Wow.
And I mean, Gambale's a maniac, and he he does sweeping like I'll never do in my life. But as far as like what I needed to do,
Yeah.
it was just so crucial to opening up kind of doorways to get my speed up to where I wanted it to be, my clarity, things like that. It was all just this one style, and it's all built around just transitioning from string to string to string.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it takes practice. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I talk about the modes a lot, and this is where I learned them from you, Randy. And you taught me the modes in a way that married them with the picking style of sweep picking. So it was 3 notes per string for the most part, 2
Mhm.
notes to turn it around, right?
Mhm. Right.
And so I remember the tablature for like each week you'd give me a different mode and you'd explain to me how they are essentially connected, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Once you learn Ionian, Dorian is the second note of that, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, etc.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really get all that stuff. It was just it was patterns that I needed to learn. But I knew that if I wasn't doing the down, the stroke in the shape of the sweep picking, I would get a correction during the lesson. So I learned it that way, and both of those techniques together, the modes are critically important. I'm going to ask you a little bit about the modes too. But the sweep style, learning it at the same time was brilliant because I didn't have to unlearn something. It was programmed at the same time. And that was really smart instruction, I think, at that
Mm.
time.
Yeah. The three notes three notes per string thing. That's hard to say. Again, it just made sense to what I had already been doing, which was really just kind of variation of EVH. Van Halen stuff was 3 notes per string.
Okay.
And that just made sense to me. So when I started learning, first I started learning the theory of modes, and that's what GIT, MI, what they teach you, and you have to write them down, and you have to kind of get it in your brain first.
Like the scale degree, do you mean, or
Yeah, the scale degree,
Yeah.
the mode degrees, 1, flat 2, flat
Yes,
3,
yes.
4, flat 5, flats.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? So, and then that makes the Phrygian mode. So it's
Yes.
like you had to get it up here first, but for me, it stayed up here, and I couldn't transfer it into my playing.
Hmm.
Like it just, I didn't get it.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense at first. I
It
agree.
doesn't make sense. And so what guys like Frank Gambale and Scott Henderson was another one who was at MI when I was there, and he's a genius. These guys helped me understand that all modes are outlining chords. And so we did tons of jazz when I was at MI. I mean, just kind of opened the real book and just played down jazz standards. One of us would comp while the other soloed, and then we would switch.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we kind of, got our mind around soloing and improv and all this stuff. And you do that for hours and days and months on end. And so like, if you have a minor 7, like if you have, sometimes it's easier to show it than to
Sure. Yeah.
play it.
Go ahead.
If you've got, I don't know if you can hear this. If you've got if you're in the key of G and you're on the 7th scale degree, that's a minor 7 flat 5. So here's a minor 7, and then you flat that 5. There's your chord, right? So you just go, well, what do I play over that? I'm kind of in the key of G, and you would go, okay, so I'm on the 7th scale degree of G. So that's Locrian. Couldn't remember the name of it for a minute. That's Locrian. And so those kinds of modes, like they were kind of scary to me because I didn't know what to do with them other than write them on a piece of paper. And honestly, that's where a lot of music theory stops for people. And because it's kind of intimidating, like, you know, especially when you hear these jazz greats just playing it so effortlessly, but their choice of notes just always stood out to me, and they were so perfect for the chord. You know, for the chord, that was everything. And so you go through modes, and that's all modes is outlining whatever chord you're playing. If you're in the key of, I don't know if you guys can hear this or not. Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay. If you're in the key of G, and you got, okay, so your modes are Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian. So if you have a progression that's just a 1-4, you can kind of use that Lydian mode to make it sound interesting.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yes.
That's a big Steve Vai one, Lydian. And it's all about outlining the chord. That's really what it is. But it took the right teacher saying the right thing to go with my style that I was already, you know, under my fingers to make that click. And so I guess I'm just really grateful for Frank Gambale coming along and making sense of something that I doubt I would have made sense of otherwise. I mean, I really doubt it. I don't know.
Well, I'm thankful for Gambale coming along for you because you were the one that passed it down. You paid it forward to me, and you're right. There was a lot of memorization. There was a lot of practice. There was a lot of playing. And then one day it clicks. Then at least for me, one day it clicked.
Right.
And I recall what was happening was I had a little boombox. I had recorded some little riff in a mode because I was practicing riffs in certain modes. That's one of the reasons why I loved our lessons so much, is you would give me some tools, you would explain them to me, and I would have homework to practice it. And part of the homework was improvisation. You know, your sheets would be, you know, you'd have the scale degree at the top, Ionian, you'd have it written out, you'd have the articulation of the up and down strokes. So I'd have those bass lines, and by the end, I've got 7 of these sheets, and I'm trying to practice them, figure them all out. And then I would come up with riffs. Yeah. So I would bring in, hey, Randy, I think this is in a Mixolydian. You're like, all right, dude, let's hear it. And so I'd play it. And here's what was great. You were having the right teacher is critically important, right, to a person's success, because if there's a balance of motivation and there's a balance of critique and inspiration, and if it's the right level, you'll just explode. You can do anything. The student can do anything. And you were one of those teachers for me. And when I'd come in, I would be so excited to show you this little riff. And most of the time, it was halfway decent. Every now and then it might have been in a different mode, and then we'd go, you know, explore that a little bit. But you would get so jazzed at these little things that I would come up with, and you would reinforce the positive, which made it so fun to me. Then you were playing the riff that I just made up, and then you'd say, okay, go. Now find the notes of that mode that resonate with you over this thing. And we would trade off solos. And it was like 10-15% of the lesson was sort of focused on the tools, and the rest of it was just jamming. It was so fun. I dreamed about it during the week. I'd be in school staring out the window, just I couldn't wait to get home and come up with a new, you know, lick to try to impress you or to make it work. And so from a teaching standpoint, that's one of the things that was so great about your style. And I know today, you know, you're an instructor beyond just music and in life and other things. We'll get into that in a little bit. But let me shoot back to my sheet here so I can stay a little bit on course because I have so many fun things to talk to you about.
Well, I just have to break in real quick and just say, man, you were a dream student. I mean, you know, a teacher is only as good as their student, I think. And you were a dream, man. I mean, you worked hard. You had tons of passion. Before we came on, we were trying to figure out how old we were back then. And you said you were 15, 17?
Yeah. 15, 16. Yeah.
And I was in my, I don't know, whatever, early 20s. But you worked hard and you loved it. I mean, you couldn't get enough of it, and you had talent. I mean, you were, you know, when you're a music teacher, we did half-hour sessions, right?
Yeah. Well, yours every now and then would go a little bit over.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's like a conveyor belt of students.
Sure.
And Jason, you were just one of 15 students I would have in a day.
Yeah.
And I had a student. I remember I had a girl who had 4-inch fingernails, and she was trying to fret the guitar, and like it just her finger wasn't even coming close because her nail was hitting the fretboard. And I said, you know what? I'm really sorry to tell you this, but you're going to have to clip your nails or you're never going to be a guitar player. And she's like, absolutely not.
Oh,
is there anything else I can do? And I'm like, no. And she quit. I never saw her again. And so it's like, you know, I had tons of students like that and stories like that. Like, Jason, you were one in a million as a student. So it was as fun for me as it was for you, just so you know, man. So.
Well, that's great to hear. And yeah, because I was having a blast. And,
yeah, me too. Me too, man.
So speaking of guitars, there's a song about a guitar, and the song is called Time to Burn. What is the significance of that song for you and its writer?
Yeah, so its writer is a guitar player named Dan Huff, and DANN HUFF. And he was a session player in LA. And so when I was growing up, like I said, I kind of grew up with Joe Perry and Zeppelin, and then Van Halen hit, and that just kind of blew my brain into a million pieces. And from there, I started to listen to bands like Chicago. I'm from Chicago, so the band Chicago was like, you know, super cool. And then just stuff on the radio, like Michael Jackson, Madonna, like everything, all the pop stuff that was huge back then. I would hear this like familiar guitar sound on everything, every song, every artist. The biggest of the big artists had the same kind of guitar stuff going on. So I started to investigate this, and it was like one of three guys. It was Steve Lukather, Mike Landau, or Dan Huff. And those three guys, they played, I mean, tens of thousands of sessions. You've probably heard them and you didn't know that you heard them, or maybe you did. But once I got hip to what these guys were doing and how musical they were, and the sounds and the solos and just the approach to every kind of style of music, I wanted to be a session player more than anything in the world. And so that's what I just started, you know, working on. And those are the guys I listened to. So Dan Huff was one of my three just heroes, just giants, untouchable, you know. Well, it turns out that Dan Huff was a friend of the family from like when I was a baby in Wheaton, Illinois. His mom was friends with my mom. And I'm like, what are you telling me? That's unbelievable. So she said, yeah, you should make him a demo. And I'm like, no way am I making him a demo. This guy is like a god to me. Are you kidding me? And so, yeah. And so at 22, I made this crappy demo and I sent it in to Dan Huff. Well, I was like, man, you don't know me, but my mom knows your mom. Like I was so embarrassed, and she made me do this and all this stuff. And so he calls me back and he's like, hey, this is Dan Huff. I mean, guys, it was out of body experience for me. And he goes, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I want to do what you do. I want to be a studio musician. And he goes, well, your stuff is great. Move to Nashville and start working. And I was like, okay. And so I moved to Nashville like the next week, and Dan got me every session I did, every tour I did. He staked his personal reputation on me. He would say, like, people would call him and he'd go, I can't make it, but call this Pearce guy because he can do whatever I can do.
Wow.
And which wasn't true in my opinion. And so, but I would show up and I'd have to deliver something. But I mean, he was more than just a mentor to me at that point. He was a friend, and he was like a teacher of a proportion that I'd never experienced, because it was such a personal relationship. Mm-hmm. So fast forward to I forget what year Giant came out. His band was called Giant. Was it 92? 91? 92. It was.
Yeah. Their album Time to Burn came out in 1992.
There
By
you
the
go.
way,
Yeah.
check it out if you're into guitar playing. Time to Burn, Giant. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was the year before I moved to Nashville. So he was still doing sessions and things. He was still just this LA god of guitar, but he started a band. Like, his dream was to be just a shredder, just a rock, like front man. And so he formed this band named Giant, and they only made 2 albums, I think, with Dan. Unfortunately, they came out in the early 90s when Nirvana and Pearl Jam and grunge took over the music scene. So like, nobody really knows who these guys are, but yeah. So,
well, they had maybe 2 radio hits, because I remember hearing them on the radio, especially in the Chicago area. And by the way, side note, we send us comments and questions. We're getting some in real quick. Christine's asking, in California. Yes, Randy Pearce is in Southern California, outside of Los Angeles.
Yes,
and Christine also adds, a true sign of a great teacher is your passion, Jason. Yeah, I guess I can't hold back the passion for studying under Randy and playing guitar. And then Adam has a question. What about Beethoven? You guys had to play at church? ? LOL. Adam, that's my brother. Yeah, we can get back to that. But yes, one of my lessons was to learn. Bach had these inventions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bach, not Beethoven, Bach. And they're 2-part inventions. So he was playing one on one hand, one on the other hand, and they were so complex that they're perfect for 2 guitar players to play together. Right. And so you taught me half of Bach's 13th invention, and we played it at church, and it was frickin' the coolest thing, especially during that time, Randy, because it was like the neoclassical era, where it's like if you could earn some street cred if you're a shredder, and you could bring in a little neoclassical flair, some Phrygian major, some harmonic minor, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I digress, but wanted to just shout out a couple of those comments there. Thank you for participating, guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yngwie Malmsteen was another huge one for me when I was in high school. Rising Force. You guys remember Alcatraz, the band Alcatraz? He was with them for a while. And so he kind of unlocked that whole harmonic minor diminished stuff. That was just, it was just killer, man.
And you recall who replaced him in Alcatraz?
Yeah. Steve Vai. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to show. This is just first of all, my wife is awesome, and this is just one simple example. This was a birthday gift. I don't know if you can see that. It is a vinyl, original vinyl of Flexible, which is Steve Vai's first album. I think he saved up. He spent like $5,000, and when he was just breaking away from Frank Zappa's band, recorded Flexible. There's a song on here that resonates with you. Do you recall the name of that song?
Yeah, the Attitude song. Guitar players, I'm sure you know this. It was the song that he hit the scene with back in, oh man, again, I'm so bad with years. Was that 80? I mean, it had to be early 80s.
I'm looking on the back here.
Okay.
Let's see. So 84 was when this came out, manufactured by Light Without Heat Incorporated, which was his company.
Vi, he's awesome. Yeah. So So Guitar Player magazine, I lived on Guitar Player magazine, man.
Yeah, me too.
And so they would do these things every once in a while where you'd open it up to the middle, and there was one song on vinyl, and it was like a tear out page. And so you would tear out. I remember Chet Atkins had one, and Steve Vai had one, and it was the Attitude song. And I'm like, Steve Vai, who's this? So I tear this thing out and put it on my record player and drop the needle, and the Attitude song started up. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is an alien. I mean, what is this? What are these sounds?
Yes.
I'd never heard anything like it. But I was sharing with Jason yesterday. I mean, Van Halen was king in 1984. I mean, he was untouchable. So to release a song like Attitude Song, which was so weird and quirky, but still technically mind-blowing, I just thought that was a really brave move of Steve Vai. And it wasn't a giant budget like Van Halen had at the time. And he just threw it out there for the world. Like, here I am. And man, that takes a lot of guts to not, number one, just copy Van Halen, first of all.
Right.
And number two, to do something so completely different, but still just take the scene by storm. I was just like, man, dude, good for you, man.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it was unlike anything you'd ever heard, and he just didn't care. I mean, it was just the coolest stuff. And the whole album is incredible and incredibly weird. The Attitude Song is great because it's a good entry point to that album if you want to get into it, because it's just awesome rock. But if you peel back the layers of the onion, it is got incredibly complex time signature, and polyrhythms, and it's just basically kind of a 2 or 3 guitars playing with brilliant drumming, brilliant bass. The rhythm in this, like the licks are incredible. What he's actually doing with the whammy bar and all these different things are like still today try to do it, right? It still holds up today. It's pretty innovative stuff. And I think important in sort of the catalog of the progression of, rock guitar. But before I cut you off, you were talking about like the sad era. There was a time where right before it, I remember watching Hot for Teacher, and the kids, like his teacher is hot and he's got the hots for her and he can play the guitar, and that's the key to getting, hot girls. And so that was the simple formula. And then there's what was it? The Audience is Listening, Passion and Warfare. There was a video for that too. Same sort of concept. If you can play the guitar, you get the girl. I mean, it was all about, could you shred on the guitar, Johnny Be Good, and beyond. And that was the secret to being cool. And so I spent hours and hours and hours trying to be cool, because that was probably the only way I was going to get there. And then all of a sudden, and I do love Nirvana, and there's so much great music that came out of it, but all of a sudden something happened. And it clicked over. Somebody hit a switch, and it was, by the way, no more guitar solos. Or they had to be kind of punk solos. You had to, if you took some lessons, we don't want to hear it. And I was like, what is that? Why did that happen?
That was a dark, dark day. Although we did get Dave Grohl and Foo Fighters, who I love to death.
Me too, of course.
What's interesting about what you just said is so a lot of what I do is music ministry in the church. Yeah. And kind of bringing a lot of professional things that I've experienced to the church and try to to raise the level of excellence and things. But it's come full circle where these worship guitar players now, I mean, not to be mean or anything, but a lot of them never progressed past 4 or 5 chords, or like a single string lead line with tons of delay and reverb, and that's the end of the story. Mm-hmm. And again, I mean, I'm talking like today's youth, and they've never even heard of Eddie Van Halen. Mm-hmm. So that's their world. That's their reality. So if you come into a church and you can actually play, you know what I mean? And you can actually like solo and play scales and things, you're kind of like not cool. Like you're doing something that's like a dinosaur. Like we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And that took me by surprise when I first started kind of re-emerging into my local church. I was just like, wow, this is a bummer, man. And so, so the art of learning scales and modes and like being musical, it's kind of a lost art these days outside of like jazz clubs or things like that.
Mhm.
I don't really hear it anymore. I mean, do you?
Well, here's what I get excited about. First thing, it was like we woke up and the parameters changed and we're like, wait a second, what? And
Right.
there's a movie, there's a documentary about Metallica. I don't know if you've seen this. I think it's called Some Kind of Monster.
Oh,
And there's
yeah.
this,
Metallica. Yeah.
there's a scene in there where
Yeah.
Kirk Hammett is talking to the producer, and you can tell he's a bit flustered. Like the camera comes in and he's flustered. He's flustered, and the conversation goes something like this: "Well, I hear what you're saying, but you're saying that solos are out now, but if we want to be ahead of the curve, then that means if we do solos now, we're ahead of the time." Because they're going to come back, and the producer's like, "Listen, I'm not saying no solos, Kirk. I'm just saying it's got to serve the song, right?" But it's so true. It was this whole thing. And here's what I get excited about. If you're really paying attention to popular music now, even though there's sub bass and there's trap and there's all these other influences, there's an amalgamation. Then it like sort of so it's sort of like grunge. It was like heavy stuff, no solos. Then it was like ukulele and acoustic guitar and whistling and clapping and thumbs and snapping. And now here's what's exciting. I'm hearing the guitar again.
Right.
I'm hearing it. It's in there. It's coming out. And it's cool again. It's a primary featured thing, and it's just a matter of time because it's a matter of time.
That's right.
But everything you've learned, everything we've learned from the modes and all of these different things help give us an edge over. It's just added tools you can pull from when you need it.
Yeah, music is kind of like fashion. It's like mom jeans are back. It's like,
Okay,
wait, what?
okay.
So those are cool now. My daughters have mom jeans. And
Oh, like high waist.
yeah, like
sort of
high
style?
waist. Like
Okay.
that's an SNL joke.
That's
And
it?
now they're
Okay.
like $100 at wherever. But so music is the same way. And my son is a guitar player too. He just turned 20 years old,
Mhm.
and he played something for me just a couple weeks ago, and he hits it, and it's this like drum beat of 4 on the floor, and this clean funk guitar, and I'm like, Parker, that's disco. That's from like 1977. And he's like, oh yeah, disco. I've heard of that. And it was a straight up, I mean, it was like the Bee Gees, like YMCA or something,
Yeah.
with this super funky, so he's learning funk guitar now.
I love
And
it.
it's just like it all kind of comes back. So I don't know, maybe shredding's coming back someday too.
It
Oh,
is
no.
back. It is alive and it's back. And if you really look for it, you just go on Instagram, start searching some hashtags on Shred. There's a whole revolution of shredders out there who are hungry for it, who are doing it, who have really taken it to another level. And so there's a part of me that loves it, and that's why I do little fun videos that incorporate a little bit of that here and there. It's not for everybody, but the fundamentals of it can be used for creating things that do resonate with a broader audience. And I think that is a good point to consider, sort of as things modulate in the popular sphere of things. Now, speaking of Steve Vai, he was in a film, one of the greatest iconic guitar films back in the day, called Crossroads, right? Not to be confused with the Britney Spears film, which I'm sure is fine, but probably a little different. And he played a character in there called Jack Butler, and Jack Butler was the devil's guitar player,
Right.
which is kind of an ironic because I'm transitioning on the name of this film was called Crossroads. And where you have landed, first of all, in Nashville, Dan Huff, he vouched for you, and you had an incredible experience playing on numerous records with all kinds of artists from different genres there. And you previously had a connection that was probably helpful in your experience. What is Willow Creek, and how did that experience help pave the way for a connection you made in Nashville?
So Willow Creek was my home church, and it was what's known as for those of you that aren't in church world, it's what's called a mega church. You've probably heard that term. All that means is that it's a larger church with thousands of people instead of hundreds of people. And so those are mainly the size of church that I've served in and been on staff in. That's just kind of where I keep winding up. But the fun thing is that you get to operate at a pro level, meaning that there's a stage and you have in-ear monitors and you have lights and you have you run with tracks and things like that. So you can take your pro experience and you don't have to kind of leave it outside the door. You can bring it with you and utilize that to really try and create what we call an excellent environment, not a perfect environment. I mean, striving for perfection, you'll wind up, wanting to die, but you can strive for excellence because excellence translates whether you're a churchgoer or you're just, a non-churchgoer who likes to listen to the radio and go to concerts. If something's done well, that resonates and that communicates with people. So that's really what I've done since, my early 20s and then again in my late 20s to present day. So, yeah.
When you were in Nashville, you met Steven Curtis Chapman.
Yeah.
And you had the opportunity to record with him and his band, as well as go on tour with him. And I've seen him in concert. He came to Northern Virginia a couple years ago. And here's what I love about worship music is that it has the formula to touch you in your heart. And here's what I mean. It's like watching a film where the score gives you an emotion and a feeling. It lets you know what you see on the screen. It kind of reinforces what's on the screen. It tells you, it gives you a hint as to what the film is trying to go for. Worship music, you guys have dialed it in to the point to where it's it creates that emotion. It touches you in the heart, and once someone's opened up to that, it's a great opportunity to deliver a message or of hope or inspiration or an instruction, etc. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree 100%. One of the things that we saw was that Christians for the most part are pretty forgiving as far as if you stink, they'll kind of give you a pass. I don't know why that is, but it just kind of is.
Well, it could have something to do with Jesus.
That could be. Although I'm pretty sure Jesus likes good music too. I hope so. But here's what we found out was people who don't go to church, people who aren't Christians, maybe they grew up atheist or Catholic or something like that. And now for whatever reason, they find themselves in a seat in your church. What do we have for them? They don't know the worship songs we're doing. They feel weird anyway, just being there. So what we started to realize was, hey man, if we can do a song that's on the radio, take your pick of any of the songs that are on the radio and do it really well. As best we can, and not have it like stink and be embarrassing. And then it also can have a message. Yeah. Like back to Nirvana, that was one of my favorites. We call them specials. That was one of my favorite specials we did was Come As You Are. You remember that song? As soon as you hit that riff, if you have a guy who's not in church normally, and he hears that riff, he goes, "Oh my gosh, I know that song.
Yep.
That's Nirvana." And then they kind of lean in a little bit, like, what is happening here in church? And then you play the song and you do it as best you can, and then you tie in that message with like the message of Jesus, which is, hey, you can come as you are.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to try and, you know, soak yourself in bleach and clean yourself up, come as you are. If you're doused in mud, come as you are. I'll clean you up. If you can kind of like make that, you know, connection of the dots, that's a powerful, powerful way of communicating kind of the love and grace of Jesus. So that's really kind of a unique, specialized way of communicating the good news that I have really embraced. And what's cool about this is that it takes everything that I did as a pro and everything that I grew up loving, like AC/DC and Van Halen and all that stuff, and just marrying it within the local church. Now, the downside to that is that you have to have a pretty special church to be able to pull that stuff off.
I would imagine,
and
yeah.
People not shoot you on sight because they think you're worshiping Satan.
Yeah, yeah.
So fortunately, God has put me in unique situations like that where I'm able to do that. And that's where I'm at right now, this church called Crossroads, like my hat, here in Camarillo, California. You know, if you have a congregation and more than anything, they want their neighbor who is really hurting and broken, and they're going through a really terrible marriage, or they just got fired from their job, and they feel like, you know, God kind of has forgotten about them a little bit. And they want more than anything for them to come to church and hear that God loves them and to be able to connect with some music. That's the win for that person, you know, that person in the congregation.
That is so cool.
If you have that person, if you have a church like that, that can embrace like a worship team, like, you know, what I'm trying to do, man, that's just a home run. And God orchestrates those. But in my experience, I've been in ministry 30 years now. My experience is that's a pretty rare, special thing. But it is out there. You know, churches are out there that really try and, you know, create those safe environments for people to come and not feel weird. You know what I mean? So
it's really an interesting story because it's like music therapy. A couple of weeks ago, I'd mentioned to you that I had a music therapist, a certified music therapist on the show, who's a friend of mine. And he gave a story about how he was being introduced to a new client by the client's mother. And it was a young kid who was in high school. And she said, basically, good luck. I don't think he's even going to talk to you, but, you know, good luck. And so he said, okay, well, thanks. And so he goes into a session and the kid sits down and he says, what kind of music do you like? He goes, well, you're not going to like it. He goes, well, what is it? He goes, Metallica. And then Tom, my buddy, says, yeah, he goes, I really was not a fan of Metallica. But so we started listening to Metallica. And he said, and we listened to one song and I was listening and listening. And then I said, what's another song? And so he gave me another song. It was another Metallica song. And he played another Metallica song. And then by about 50 minutes, his time came up. And he said, okay, well, that's your time today. I really hope I see you again next week. And this kid said, you know, I hope I'm not going to be the next school shooter. And he goes, you're not. He goes,
Whoa.
Come back and see me next week. We're going to talk through this. And so the point was that it was Metallica. He tells the story much better than me, but it was such an interesting, it's exactly what you're talking about. That connection, that relationship building through music allowed him to open up to communication. And ultimately, through years through music therapy and tagged on to other professionals within the field, psychologists, et cetera, he's done great. He's done well. He's gone through a therapeutic healing process. So what you're doing, you may not be a certified music therapist, but those principles, the tool of music is what you're leveraging, it sounds like, in a place of healing.
Yeah, and it's that concept of meeting people where they are, like you just said. That's a great story.
Hmm.
You want to try and meet people where they are, and I think the church in a lot of ways has done a kind of a bad job with that, because it's kind of like anything that's happening in the world outside of church must be bad somehow. And I know that's a blanket statement. I don't mean, every Christian out there, but I've experienced that. And that's not really true. I don't believe. You talk about Metallica. When I first started teaching, this was a couple of years before I met you, Jason. I was straight out of MI, and all I did was teach Metallica, because this was 1989, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And Metallica was huge in 89. And I had never heard of Metallica before I became a guitar teacher. And so I had my roster of students, and one after another, they would all come in with Metallica tapes. And they would go, "I want to learn this." And be like, "Okay." So I listened to it, and I would just hear it, and I would learn it, and then I would write it down on their tablature,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd send them home with it. And that was our lesson. And then they'd come back, and then we'd work on it together. And it was nothing but Metallica. I didn't do sight reading. I didn't teach them chords. I didn't teach them anything except Metallica. And my teaching roster was like quadruple what the other guitar teachers' rosters were.
Wow.
At the point where they were like, "Man, what are you doing? Like, where are you getting all these students?" And I'm like, "I'm just kind of teaching them what they want to know."
Well,
And
Kirk
so,
Hammett must have been on something with those golden solos.
right. And I'm talking like the simplest stuff, like that song, that down, 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 whatever that song is.
One,
Down,
yeah.
down, down.
Sure.
I mean, the simplest of simple, but that's where these kids were.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so to not judge them and go, Metallica,
Yes.
it's 3 notes, boo. Here's what you really need to learn.
Sure.
Whatever it looks like. The church kind of does that too a little bit with music.
Yeah.
And I think if we can get away from that and just be embracing of all styles and all cultures and all, music
Yes.
styles and things, I mean, that's some powerful stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Well, let me just add that you're not just playing your formula isn't just coming up with the top 20 playlist in the US and beyond and doing that, and then people are showing up. Your level of professionalism and, as you say, excellence, sound quality, and I've listened to a ton of these videos of you and your band, and currently at Crossroads and other places. It is hands down a concert, and at the level of professionalism as something you'd be shelling out tons of money to go see with your favorite artist on the banner. So
thanks.
good.
Thank
You obviously are fantastic. The people you have surrounded yourself with in that band are equally fantastic and notable, and including this youngster named Parker Pearce. And who is that? You mentioned him earlier.
Yeah. So first of all, just thank you for saying that. That's very, very kind of you. Everybody you see on stage with me are volunteers.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, some of them are pros, but very rare. Most of them are volunteers. And so they've got 9-to-5 jobs, and they love what they do, and they love to bring it on Sunday morning. And they're like you were when you were a student. They're really interested in learning and growing and being a little bit better than they were last time they played. And so it's just a great team, but yeah, so they're all volunteers. So Parker's my son. He's my oldest son. I've got a son and 2 daughters. And so he's just turned 20. And he came on my team when I was at a church called Flatirons in Colorado when he was 10 years old. And yeah, he's just become I think he's better than I am right now, honestly. Like I don't play like as much as I used to, for a lot of reasons. Like my job is it's doing other things now.
Sure.
So man, I don't sit down and play like I do. But he plays 8-10 hours a day,
Wow.
and so he is frighteningly good. I know every dad says that about their kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
He is scary good. I think he's better than me. So so he's been with me for the last 10 years, and he's come on staff with me over the years, and he's become like a worship pastor, and he puts all the tracks together, all the Ableton and Logic Pro, and
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
he does tons of programming, tons of synth stuff. And he, on top of just being a great guitar player, he's a musician. He listens to everything. He's constantly throwing MP3s my way. I mean, daily.
Wow.
And so it's really fun. Like, the older I get, the more, it's just what happens. The more out of touch you get with the teenagers and, the college age. That's just kind of what happens. But he keeps me in that world, which I'm so grateful for. And so, he kind of keeps me young a lot of ways, and kind of keeps me aware of the music that's current right now, which is super cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, he is awesome. I can tell, and anybody can tell if you just pay attention. Get online and go to, I think it's iCrossroads.org. Is that the website for the church?
iCrossroads.org. You can really see him. I mean, I've been out of Flatirons, my Colorado church, for 5 years now,
Mhm.
but I was with them for 8 years, and we really built this church together. And we ran after that style of programming that I was talking about with doing, top 40 stuff. We did that. We kind of got that down to a science. I mean, over 8 years, and we worked really, really hard for that. So if you can find any of those videos on YouTube, they're out there.
Flatirons. Okay.
Flatirons Church. And you can really see Parker as a little kid alongside me. And you can see him getting bigger and bigger and bigger with every year, because he started when he was 10.
Yeah.
So if you can find those videos, they're pretty fun to see. Some of them have been taken down now, but they're out there.
Well, I can only imagine having sort of years and years of access to a teacher like you, and that means a lot. That is a great compliment to him that you have invited him in to be part of the team, because you have to perform at a high level to even feel comfortable playing around Randy. So that's fantastic.
Thanks, man. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, he was pretty much born on stage. He was born when I was touring with Steven Curtis.
Okay.
So when he was 2 years old, it kind of like he didn't know anything else.
Wow.
But the stage. He would come out on stage, and he'd be on the side stage drumming on a garbage can. And I mean, it was just, we grew up literally on a stage. So it's nothing for him to be on a stage.
Yeah.
Whereas great. I had severe stage fright that I had to overcome with years and years. I mean, when I was at MI, I was scared to death. I really was. I just was overwhelmed. And I was a teenager. But when I got to Willow Creek right out of MI, and I was on their massive stage, my hands would shake. Mm-hmm. I was so nervous, and I'm like, this is really bad as a guitar player. Like, I can't control myself.
Yeah.
And that went on for literally, guys, 2 solid years. Wow. And I had to just work that out of my system. So now, I mean, gosh, I don't even think about it, but it took a long time. So, man, if any of you watching have stage fright, take heart. Don't give up, because you can overcome it. I'm living proof. Believe me.
Wow. Heck, I get nervous getting on live stream. So my hands were shaking too.
Yeah.
So we got a question, and then we're gonna wind down here. Man, I've had so much fun chatting with you, and I hope sometime in the future we can reconnect and do this again. This question is from James, last name Price. Sounds familiar. Ask Randy if he ever plays acoustic guitars.
I do play acoustic. In fact, on some of the clips you opened up with, I was on an acoustic. Not nearly as much as I do electric. That's my main thing. But I love acoustic guitar. and I play a Taylor. I know I've got a Martin shirt on, which is a bad promo for Taylor, but yeah, Martins are great too. But yeah, I own a Taylor, and they're just great guitars. The expression system is super cool. The 3 knobs are amazing. Bob Taylor's a genius. And the coolest all acoustic thing I ever did was a Steven Curtis album at Abbey Road, Road Studios. And we were in the Beatles room, Studio 2.
You recorded at Abbey Road?
I did, yeah.
Oh my God, that's awesome. That
yeah,
is awesome.
So there's an album out there. I think it's called Live at Abbey Road with Steven Curtis Chapman. It's like a 5-song, like mini EP, something like that. And yeah, because Steven's label was part of EMI Records, and so we had access to Abbey Road, and so we did an unplugged album, and that was the most acoustic I ever played in my life. And I played a ton of slide, like dobro, Taylors. Kind of cool story. I played one song on electric, and but I didn't bring anything but my acoustic rig, and so I borrowed. Gosh, I think there was a Gibson ES 175.
Okay.
The hollow body, the cutaway.
It was there in the studio. It was
there
in the studio.
I don't know whose it was.
Okay.
And but I didn't have an amp, and so they're like, "Oh yeah, back there, I think there's like a closet or something. Dig around in there." And sure enough, there along this, I don't know if you guys know Abbey Road Studios, but there's a classic like stairway that leads up to the control room. Okay?
Yes.
And under that stairway, there's a little cutout. You can see it if you look up pictures of like the Beatles. So sure enough, I open this thing and it's pitch dark in there, and I'm kind of feeling around, and I feel like this amp, and I pull out this amp, and it's a Tweed Bassman, and I'm like, what is this? What is this doing here? And the guy's like, oh yeah, that's George Harrison's Bassman. He just leaves it here. I was like,
wow.
Oh, okay. And so I played a track through George Harrison's, like it was like a 59 Tweed Bassman.
Wow.
And totally clean with a Gibson. I mean, just wow, out of body experience. But everything else was all acoustic, and so I really do love acoustic. I don't think I'm that good at acoustic, honestly. I wouldn't consider myself an acoustic player. Steven Curtis is an immaculate acoustic player. That's his main instrument. And we used to track together. I know we're overtime, but we used to track together, and he would play finger picking, and we'd be in the same booth. Okay. So he'd have his acoustic and I'd have my guitar, and I would wait for him to be done like through the verse and chorus before I could play. And his part was perfect. I mean, perfect. Every take, every time. And I was scared to play my first entrance because if I blew it for him too.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I had to be like on my game, because he was such a freakishly good acoustic guitar player. Yeah, so I'm not on that level. I'm really not. So I'm way more of an electric guy.
Well, I'm gonna show you something, because I have a feeling that was a leading question. Now, my dad has gotten into he's kind of like he's a luthier, I guess is what you call him. So he has gotten into building guitars, electric and acoustic, and he's started his own line called J. Price Guitars. And I'm going to show you this thing. This one is made of koa wood, and he's got he creates them, builds them himself, and he's also got a team that he works with to do larger orders, etc. Let me show you this thing. If you can see any of it. This is made of koa wood. So I got a lot of reflection in here, and not in front of the camera, and it's got these beautiful inlays, and if you look really close at the front of this thing, you'll see a J. Price logo on it.
Dude, that looks like a $6,000 Martin. That's like crazy.
Well, he has done his research on Martins and Taylors and etc. They play so good. And What's
Oh my gosh.
interesting about the playability is that they almost play like an electric guitar. Electric guitars, when you play electric guitar and you go to an acoustic, it's tough, it's clunky, it's hard to play, it's not fun, it's hard to bend stuff, it's hard to move around. All the things, all the articulations that you love with an electric become a little bit more complex. And these play really nice, surprisingly nice. So I've actually got a couple of them, and I'm going to show you one more real quick. This is an electric.
Oh, okay. Dang, man, that's crazy.
So I don't have it plugged in, but this is just a Strat style. It's got his logo there. This is all black. It's like black on black. And he put this little dude is like, it's like a built-in gain. It's like a fuzz sort of. Basically, he says you flip this down when you just want to go into hyperspace. So that's where that's what that's about.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah,
dude, your dad. I was telling you this yesterday, but your dad is just gold. I remember him from years ago, decades ago. He is just one of the kindest, most humble, warm dudes you could ever meet in your life. I'm not surprised he's that good at building guitars.
Oh, that's really nice of you to say. Yeah, I mean, my dad is the one that got me into music, and the original music mentor for me. And he was the one I told you yesterday that saw it was so important when you were getting ready. You were done with Naperville Music and you were ready to go to Nashville. And we coordinated so that I had a little bit more time with you before you headed out, so I could absorb a little bit more knowledge, because he knew how important that connection was for a young student, and the amount of things that I was, he saw how I was growing under your teaching. So anyway, yeah, my dad's awesome.
Yeah, he is awesome. That's incredible, man. That's incredible. Your mom's awesome too, of course.
Yeah, my mom's awesome too. She remembers you as well. She was the one that drove me to many of those lessons.
I remember. Yeah, your parents are just gold, man.
She handled logistics. So
Yeah.
Anyway, Randy, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. I so enjoyed catching up, and look forward to doing it soon. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to listen to Randy's music and want to go to, and you've got virtual services now. You're not only head of the sort of music side of things, but you're also a worship leader. You teach and inspire, and you've got messages every week that people can check out. And I would highly recommend that they do that. I'm certainly doing it. And when things when time is right and we can make it back out to California, can't wait to come out and see you, man.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Yeah. In this season of COVID, thank God for online.
Yeah.
So,
100%.
Yeah. Thank you for reaching out, man. This was a real treat. I really appreciate it.
All right, man. Have a great night.
All
See
right,
you,
bro.
everybody. Bye now.